Okay, good evening, everybody. So we're getting in there fine, and welcome to AHDB's series of webinars on the Monitor Farm Mondays. Harry and I have tonight's session, which is talking tackle. So we're going to have a good chew of the fat with our speakers tonight. So, as I said, we've got Harry Henderson with us. We've got Bill Gray, who's been our monitor farmer in East Lothian. We've got David Aglen, who's beginning his strategic farm career with us as well, and we've got Doug Christie, who's probably been at the no-till direct drill for as long as anyone's been doing it, I think, in Scotland. So welcome to you guys, and thank you for joining us. Moving on, so tonight we will be recording the session. Just to let you know, obviously everybody, all the participants are on mute. This platform doesn't allow that much interaction. We'll hopefully stick to time, although I'm famed for not, but we'll try and stick to an 8 o'clock finish. Basis on Enroso points. So if you look to your dashboard on the side down here, you should see the questions tab. So if you click the little arrow beside the questions tab, and there you can type your name, your basis number, and I think you need your postcode still as well as helpful. And again, your name and Enroso number for that. So if you can just put that in the questions tab, which is in the side there. Okay, so if we move on, and you can follow us on Twitter as always at AHDB Scotland, and you'll see a list of the upcoming things there. They'll be tweeted the day before with links to registration. So Harry's going to take us through the first slide deck, just with the transition of farming through the years, and certainly where all the new influences are. So we'll kick that off just with a quick poll before we start. So just to antagonise the audience a little bit here. So, question: how much would you be willing to bet on the Grand National 40-horse race? So, £1 million prize money. So we'll open the poll. Now you need to click on the polls on the side there. So if you click the arrow, and then I think you need to click the little window button to allow you to click the button. So when you click the poll in front of you, you should see it go black. So if you click polls, and then I think you need to click the double window button just at the side there as well, just to take it out and make that screen live, and that should let you click it. So £0 to £500, £500 to £250,000, £250 to £750,000, £750 to £1 million, or would you go over the £1 million prize to £1 million to £1.5 million prize? Okay. There we are. Well, Harry, we shall leave that one in your capable hands.
Well, thank you. I think, yeah, that's some fair results. I suppose what we were trying to do really was ascertain your approach to risk and your approach to change. And on when you walk across your fields, are you thinking this needs to change, or are you thinking this is just how I like it? I haven't really got a lot drilled. It's rained last year. It rained too early this year, and I'm happy with that because that means I don't have to change. Then you know that's what we were trying to get at, is your attitude to risk really, and to change overall. So we go on to the next slide. All I wanted to do really was set the scene. Go over the next slide, please. That's it. So I wanted to really set the scene, and I pitched this photograph off the internet, to be honest. And someone out there might say that's my tractor, but it's a great photograph because it tells so many stories. And what I wanted to get across was that the tractor's great. I entirely agree with the tractor. It's highly efficient, very accurate. It's got the right tires. They look to be at the right pressure. Everything's going well. The drill, the same thing. It's a superb drill. Everyone knows the Vadestat drill. The issue I have with this photograph is the seed bed. It's an onion bed, and it's received rain, and it's slumped together, and we're using what is effectively a cultivated drill to do a little bit more cultivation if it didn't need it already, and plant the seed. Okay, are we getting the best from that drill, or could we have used any drill? Could is that type of seedbed too wet or too fine even for a massive Ferguson 30? So that's the kind of the scene I'm setting really with that photograph, is that are we doing too much to the seedbeds? Are we committing ourselves to too much cost and not getting enough from our drilling technology that we have on farm? Go on to the next slide, please, Christian.
I think there might be a bit of a delay, but I have skipped ahead to it just so you heads up.
Okay. So this is a photograph that I took on my iPhone, and I tweeted it, and I asked I tweeted it out to farmers and said, what's happening here then? And there was a list of reasons, and the main one came up that the seedbed was too fine. It's rained. You can see it's on the headland where cultivators have turned around, gone back into the field, then it's drilled, then it's rained, and you can see that the wheat now is struggling. This is winter wheat. Photograph was taken probably about this time of year, and it's starting to die because there's anaerobic conditions in the soil. The seedbed is too fine, and we're just losing crop as a result of a very, very fine seedbed. So again, this can be a knock-on effect of having a fine seedbed, and starting out the fine seedbed and drilling it again with a cultivator or timed disc-based drill. Can we go on to the next?
Just on
slide?
that, do you think, just looking at the headland there, would you, you'll see a lot of that. Is that cultivated again prior to drilling? Do you think has maybe not helped that or helped that, or where do we, sometimes to gauge that is very difficult. Do we look at, oh, we've turned on that, I must rip it up before I drill it? Is that better? Is that worse? Where do you go?
I think it will have been done. It will have been cultivated probably twice over with a time-based, I think it's a Dalbo 10-meter cultivator, and it's just gone round. They've turned around on the headland, and then they've done the headland again, and then they've gone back in with a Vadestat drill to drill it again. So it's as fine a crumb as you can get, really, and it just emphasises do we really need to be putting into that amount of energy and effort into creating a seedbed? Are we getting better yields from finer seedbeds? I don't know that we are. And this is when a seedbed gets over fine. I'm not saying it happens on every field, but it is the result of when a seedbed gets over fine and receives some substantial rain. It struggles to drain, and the wheat struggles to grow.
Yeah,
difficult one.
I was just going to suggest, do you look at, when you've drilled it, would you come back in now and try and re-drill it, or how do you handle something like that? Are you only going to make it worse? How do you make that better?
I don't think you'd get back to it until the spring. So if you re-drill it, then a lot of your agronomy decisions, your harvesting decisions are messed up as well. So I think there was enough plant to make it carry through. It did come through. It was a photograph I took whilst I was walking the dog out the back of my house. So it did come through, but there was a lot of cost and effort went into the crop, and I don't know whether that was repaid in terms of yield and quality.
I think, so Harry, Bill Gray here. The big thing here, the big question you've got here is cost of resowing, and I think that's something that people don't take into account enough when they're looking at what they think is a poor crop. And we certainly see it time and time again where big areas of a crop will be taken out on the basis that it doesn't look like it's going to survive, and it doesn't look like it's going to do, without giving it enough time to actually see whether it's made it or not.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and we find that at benchmarking meetings, when we've done some benchmarking, people say, "Oh, well, I re-drilled that field, so those costs don't add those costs to the re-drilling." And you think, well, the business is paying for it, so they've got to appear somewhere. and they go, no, that's done and finished, and forget it. But the business is still paid for the re-drilling costs, so they have to go in, and it's a stark reminder really when those costs come through to the cost of production.
Can I butt in just very briefly, if that's all right?
Please.
The temptation is always to take a cultivator out. I've had a situation where I've had a large compost heap, the tractors and the forklift loaded in the field and the Hendrix on the headlands, and the temptation was to cultivate that. I didn't. I just direct drilled into it, and that was the best yielding part of the field. It was dry when I'd loaded the trailers and the muck spreader with the compost with the forklift, but I would have thought it would have been compacted, but that was the best yielding bit of the field. And time again, I've heard from direct drillers that it's not the be all and end all, but their end rigs now are outperforming their middle of the field.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
that does get very interesting, Doug. We've had at the Monitor Farm project, we did a headland survey with it on the 24 metres round the headland, and conventionally most farms were around 85 to 90% of total field yield on the headlands, and one of the chaps, pig farmer, happened to be an exception to the rule, 91, 92%, and he, back to the real old school way of doing it, where the headland was ploughed and sown as a complete entity at the end, and that was indeed the only way to, as Harry says, to ensure that you only got one pass on the headland. But very interesting to be able to quantify now the 24 metre round outside, what percentage of that is your total field yield.
It's quite easy now with yield mapping and so on. It should be anyway.
Yeah. I think if you're savvy enough with Gatekeeper, you can produce a gross margin map, which is very scary, because the bits towards the end of the field sometimes can be hugely loss making, whilst the bit in the middle of the field is doing very well. But of course, it depends on your style of farming, I guess. With this photograph, I was just going to illustrate is on the same farm that the big 5,000 litre self-propelled sprayer sets off into the field and just sinks straight down to the cultivation depth, and that's the first pass, that's the first round, and those ruts are then in the field for the rest of the season. And really, was it the weight of the sprayer? Was it the tire choice on the sprayer? Was the sprayer full? Doesn't really matter. It was the cultivation depth of the two passes that preceded the Vadestat drill. So again, there's some excess energy, excess cost going into this crop of wheat, which could have been avoided, and you could have had some smoother tram lines. If we go on to the next slide, please, Christian. Of course, combine drivers will tell you, well, I've got tracks on my combine now, so the sprayer ruts don't really matter. But aren't really the answer, to be honest. Of course, this photograph looks like the utopian way forwards. You've got the drill, you've got the strip ahead, you've got all the biomass in there. It's great. There's a countryside productivity stewardship scheme available to buy one of these drills. What can possibly go wrong? And you could buy one. You could go from the previous photograph of the ruts in and that sort of soil, and straight into one of these and be disappointed. And I think the comments and the learnings that I've picked up from many of the farmers I've spoken to is that it's evolution rather than revolution, and you can lurch straight into buying one of these machines and get yourself into more bother than not. So I think if that's the gist of the conversation tonight, and between Chris, ourselves, and Bill and Doug and David, we kind of mull over how cultivations and tackle can change in a controlled manner, then that's got to be a good thing. But so hopefully we'll get some good debate going through over the next 45 minutes.
Absolutely, Harry. and it absolutely cross, like you say, revolution or evolution. It's a difficult one when it takes so many horses to actually pull it. No doubt doing a good job. Now, guys, just before we press on, questions box in the side, that side down there. If you do want to put your Enroso and basis numbers in, Christian will pick it up and put you on the point sheet for that. So Enroso and basis in the questions tab, if you open it out and just and type your name and your postcode and your basis points in there, and we'll pick them up. Thanks. So now we've got Bill Gray. So we've been working with Bill on the East Lothian Monitor Farm. Midlothian, sorry, Bill on the border. Get it right. We have a poll to launch just before this one, to land Bill with it. So, a nice one for Bill here. So, £100,000 investment, Bill. Do you spend the money on a narrow and new machine, nice and warranted, an older machine and a wider machine, so that hopefully the width alleviates the fact that the machine is quite old, or do you take the money and get someone else to do it? So again, we'll launch the poll on that. So you'll see the poll tab on the side of your screen. So if you click the poll tab, and then I think you have to click the window button as well, so that you bring the poll to the front, and you should be able to click it on your screen and take a vote on that. So £100,000 cash, what do you do? Narrow and new, old and wide, or keep the money and get someone else to do it? Oof. Wow, chaps.
Wow, interesting.
Wasn't expecting that.
You've got the machinery dealers shaking in their boots. Apart from the service department. The service department will be happy.
They'll have to look out their books to be able
I'm not quite sure how to respond to that poll, to be honest. Evening, everybody. As Chris has kindly introduced me, I've been working with him on the Lothians monitor farm up until February of this year. I guess the answer to the poll is all of the above, probably, depending on that there are compromises in there, I dare say, depending on your own perfect situation or otherwise. A little bit of background from me. 160 hectare unit south of Edinburgh on pretty varied soil types. I've been here for, I noticed, Chris, you put up a question of which machine on the farm, or who has the machine on the farm with the longest hours. Well, I started to calculate how many hours I'd worked on this place, and I might put myself up as the oldest piece of machinery that was available. However, having been here for 25 years, I've been on a bit of a journey for a while. Certainly when I first came, we were on very much a plough-based system, power harrow drill, combination units, forcing crops into the ground in all sorts of conditions, and some quite tricky soil types as well to deal with at different times, as those who have been around us will know. Standard sort of 5-6 course rotation for this part of the world, which includes spring, a fair dollop, 30%, almost a spring barley in that rotation. So, we're already looking, our efficiency levels are we think, pretty good. We're keeping a spread of workload, both on delivering crops for the harvest for that particular year, and obviously the harvest itself. And bearing in mind that we run from 450 feet at the lowest part of the farm up to about 800 feet, and we're growing crops pretty successfully at that height. But there is obviously quite a spread of timing there as well. So that the journey to change for us, if I could have the next slide, Christian, probably. The journey to change for us away from a solely plough-based system, and it does have a place on our farm for a number of different reasons. We're doing some contracting, etc. as well, and trying to educate the people we're working for is part of the deal. Really, try and suggest that there are different ways of doing things. I wouldn't suggest better necessarily, but everybody hopefully has a broad horizon and an idea of what they're looking at. So really that picture there just underpins pretty much everything that we're trying to do at the minute. The ultimate answer is to end up with a root mass in that bottom right hand picture, which was a crop of Diablo at about the sort of 2 tiller stage, sown by non-inversion tillage after cover crop. And that started to drive a little bit of our cultivation policy to try and improve our organic matters and try and start to incorporate some of the cover crops of which we're extensively using now. And the top left-hand picture there shows a grazed cover crop of clover, which had cattle and sheep on it. That's now in a pretty solid crop of rape. Single pass with the cultivator, single pass with the drill, rolled in and tightened down and ready to go. The other two ones, the top right and the top left, kind of belong together in a perverse Irish sort of way, and I can say that because I am Irish. The top right hand one was actually, we're part of an agri-environment scheme, and so the top right hand picture shows destroyed quite a heavy biomass crop of clover, phacelia, and vetch. Just destroyed it by topping, let it mulch down, and when we dug a spadeful of that out, we got what was in the bottom left-hand corner. And to go back to Harry's point, when we dug it out and discovered that, I'm sure you'll agree, there's plenty of wormholes, there's plenty of structure, there's plenty of organic matter there. Why on earth would we recultivate that before we sowed it? And now having the benefit, and I'll come on to the drill choice later on, but having the benefit of a reasonably aggressive cultivator drill, we were able to quite comfortably cultivate that, and that's now a pretty tidy looking crop of spotlight. I think one of the things, go to the next slide there, Christian, please. So one of the things that moved us a little bit was we wanted to get away from a plough-based system, but we wanted enough width of cultivator and enough activity of cultivator, both tine and this mix. But that effectively started to drive the tractor requirement. And I think the most important thing that this slide shows is that you need to know what your costs are. You can't just blindly go into it and work out and say, oh, well, we need this, we need the, you know, the cent of thousands or whatever it is. You need to actually sit down and start to work out what is your cost per hour of that machine, and is that actually going to be better for you than a smaller machine or a smaller combination of tractors, etc. But really the only reason for that going in there is just to try and encourage everybody to think carefully about how you go through that planning process, and don't just, I think we might come on to reasons for change later, but you know, don't just decide that that's what I want to do, you know, and don't actually look at what it actually means to you and to your business. If you go on to the next one. So basically, we started a process of getting away from ploughing and starting to cultivate. Reasonably, probably intensive cultivation up to a point, but just trying to work the surface a little bit better and retain organic matter in that top sort of 2-3 inches of soil, where it's actually going to do the best for us. In terms of the tackle there, I did actually do a similar thing for that cultivator. That's a second-hand cultivator. Done about 6 or 7 years work, bought on spec, I have to say, but due to a dealer down in England who very kindly sent it up and said, if you don't like it, you can send it back at no cost. Well, these are the sort of things that we can actually achieve by good communication and a bit of goodwill. But it was everything that you said it was in the photographs, and we've been delighted with the machine. The most important thing about that was that we'd actually utilised somebody else's depreciation on that machine effectively before we decided to make that investment. However, the tractor needs to be the size it does to actually make that machine work to its best capacity.
We are blessed with hills in Scotland, Bill, aren't we?
Say it again, Chris.
We're blessed with hills in Scotland.
We are indeed.
It's not all flat. Now, have you seen any reduction in draft requirement at all, or what's your thoughts over your time and the transition you've been through?
Sorry, I missed the first bit of that.
Have you seen any reduction in draft requirement as you go on? Because you know, you've done quite a few experiments in fields and really raised the organic matter in there. Do you think that's working? Is it noticeable?
I would say without a doubt, yeah. I mean, albeit that machine is quite an intensive cultivator, but I guess this picture answers that story a little bit. we're now pulling a 5.5 meter cultipress behind that cultivator to give us a little bit more of point consolidation in the profile. That's a pretty chunky piece of kit now to be pulling through the soil. There's no question that when you incorporate straw, when you start to build up soil structure, the draft requirements. I haven't actually done much in the way of experiment with it, but there's no doubt that wear and tear on machinery is much less than it was, without a doubt. So I think the next stage of this is just trying to sort of continue to improve efficiencies. These are pieces of equipment that we tended to use separately, and we've now got the opportunity to use them together. Having said that, we don't, the caveat is don't do it just because you've got it. Look at the soil. If the soil is dry enough to be able to pull the press behind it at the same time, then that's fine. If it's not, you've got to think about the soil all the time. Time is important, but soil is more important, in my view. If you get it wrong, I think we've seen some of Harry's photographs, and I have to hold my hand up that we've got a couple of ones like that, and it's just for exactly that reason. Harry, over-cultivated, slightly different drill. We're just getting to learn what the drill will do, and we've got some issues this year which we haven't seen before, and that's just part of our sort of learning curve. And then I think there's one more. Yep. So the final part of the journey is doing going wider. So we're increasing the work rates. We're increasing the timeliness of our work. We now have the horsepower because of the various parts of the plan. We now have a horsepower to pull the 6 meter cultivator drill, grade and fert. Just trying to sort of make more efficiency of the passes that we have available to us. As you can see in that picture there, that is the machine actually sowing direct into that cover crop. Heaps of organic matter in the soil, heaps of organic matter being incorporated, a nice open structure. We're on the whole pretty pleased about what we're trying to achieve. It doesn't need to be black for us to be successful, I don't believe. And then I think this probably, it certainly proves the point to me. So that's a bit of an absolute sort of canter through what we've been trying to achieve over the last while. We haven't finished yet, I don't think. In answer to Harry's point about everybody could go out and get a price for a direct drill, I don't think we're quite there yet. We're continuing to improve our soil structures as we progress. And I think the longer we take care of them, then the more chances there may be in the future that we can start to move towards perhaps strip seeding or something similar. But in a way, the example of delivering a fantastic seed bed, I'm saying fantastic wheat seed bed, it's not the finest seed bed in the world, but a good seed bed for wheat to grow in a one-pass situation, following a fairly heavy biomass cover crop, I think means that we're kind of heading in the right direction.
Yep, absolutely. And your mindset for change, Bill, you definitely had the years out of the previous Vaderstad drill. I mean, it would have been 20 plus years old, so it wasn't, it was due a shift when you went for it. But when you went through looking at the tractor, I mean, again, your replacement policy had been what I would class as spot on as well. You see the cost there up in the £20 an hour. Did you look at other ways of doing it, or what's your thought to that? I mean, there are hires, lease.
We do hire a tractor in every year to help us to get through the cultivation period. We don't own all the tractors that we utilise during the year, so we hire one in the autumn for sort of 8 weeks or thereabouts. We also, in terms of that tractor, I guess that wasn't a new tractor. That was an ex-demonstrator. I took the view that was our absolute primary mover. I mean, we tend to keep equipment here for a reasonable length of time. Our sprayer's got 8,500 hours on it. Our forklift's got 9,000 hours on it. They're still in pretty good condition. They're still working well. They cost us a little bit more in repairs, but we do look after things. The guys that I have working here are excellent at maintenance and care of our kit. The Vaderstad done, I think, just over 10,000 hectares, I think, by the time we let it go. So we've been here for quite a long time. So yeah, we were probably tend to hold a bit longer, probably than most. I'm not going to steal anybody else's thunder on machinery replacement policies, which I think is coming up later in the seminar. But I'll be quite happy to chip in at that point, probably.
Yeah. And what's been your biggest, what have you seen change? What's been your biggest point of change through your career, do you think?
Biggest point of change is I guess when I started out, costs, nobody really looked at costs that well, I don't think, particularly machinery costs and input costs. Cost has become an absolute sort of cornerstone of everything we're trying to do at the minute. And everybody tends to think about how good is your gross margin. Ultimately, the net margin is vitally important, and the cost of production in terms of machinery and capital is a huge part of that. I think that has to continue, but I think also probably soil health would be the one thing I think has become much more, people are becoming much more aware of what they're trying to do and the damage that they could possibly do.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great. Thanks, Bill. I look forward to your contribution as we go. So we're going to go to David next, but we're going to drop a minute with another poll. So it's quite good. So again, here's the poll. It's open on the right-hand side on your menu bar. So if you click the polls, and I think you click the double window there, and that should take you in. Again, when you click the poll, you should see the black dot appear. So what drives your machinery replacement policy? It's worn out, leaking oil, the cost of ownership, or do you crave to be one of the cool kids? Is it the peer pressure? So David will be the youngest panelist tonight as well. There you are, David, first compliment for a while. So hopefully you'll be able to take this on. Okay, Christian. Well, there you go. So a lot of people taking it to it is worn out, yeah, but mostly in the cost of ownership. So again, when you're looking at this, guys, if you're on the right-hand side, the questions panel, we are just getting you to put your basis and Enroso numbers in the questions panel. So just type the numbers in the questions panel. Nobody else will see your question or your number or anything else. It just comes straight to Christian. So just please put your basis and Enroso numbers in the questions tab, and that'll be picked up and written on the sheet. And we'll hand over to David to take us through your journey, which also began in England.
Yes, Chris. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Yes, my journey began in East Anglia 2 to 3 years ago now. Tonight, I'm just going to talk less about the exact type of machinery we're actually using and more about kind of my journey, how we got to making decisions as we have. Me personally, as it were, and going along the road we are. At Balburney, we were a 3,000 acre unit with about 2,000 acres or just over 2,000 acres of arable cropping. But that includes wheat, barley, oats, a bit of oilseed rape this year again, beans, and veg and root crops as well. So really, in the past, decisions, we tended to make our decisions they were easy, is the simple way of putting it. You know, technology was coming along, new fungicides, new herbicides, they all worked. You put them on. Machines came along and they maybe helped improve yield at the time, and you know, life was quite straightforward, albeit. And when we changed machinery, we tended to machines were renewed and not systems were renewed and not reviewed. You know, if you needed a new plough, well, it was a case of, do you want a bigger one or a smaller one or a red one or a blue one? That type of decision, rather than actually nowadays I would look at it and think, well, do we need a plough at all? And you know, that was the kind of straightforward way of managing machinery policy, really. But when new changes were needed in the last 10 years, the weather we're getting is more intense. The prices we're getting for our produce vary hugely over the course of 2 or 3 seasons. So we don't have the reliability that maybe we had 20 years ago for our output. So we've had to address this scenario and get brave, basically, instead of taking the easy option. And one of the thoughts that comes to my mind about this is it's risk. It's about risk averseness, and it was made that poll at the start about how much money you'd spend to win the £1 million on the Grand National, and well, obviously everybody chose the 0 to 500. Why wouldn't you? You're not going to spend more money than you have to get your £1 million. But the way I view it is, strangely, within our industry, it appears to me, and I've been guilty of this too, that we actually are quite happy to view spending more money on more machinery and more inputs as less risk averse than spending less money on a lower input system, which has, broadly speaking, a similar output at the end. And I think we need to, it's a very odd one. If you're asked a simple question about betting on ratios, you'll make the sensible answer. But when it comes to growing a crop, perhaps we don't always make the real sensible answer, as it were. Next slide, please, Christian. So, yeah, so here we go. That's basically what I've just been talking about. I got ahead of myself slightly. So yeah, decisions need to change, and we're not being quite brave enough. Next slide, please. So we worked our way through our ploughing and our power harrowing, and we wore it all out, and the soil was getting harder to deal with, and the rain was washing across the surface, and the soil was washing out the gate, and all the same things that we've all seen. And then in 2015, spring 2015, we decided to try direct drilling. Other direct drills are available, I might add. It took us a long time to get a direct drill demonstrator up here in Fife, actually, to be fair. We started looking in 2013, but eventually this one turned up, and nobody really knew what they were doing with it. We took it into this big flat stubble field, and it was dry. It was the middle of April, and everything looked fine, and we kind of set it up with a bit of hash by guess and got it going and into the field. And funnily enough, when it came to harvest, the crop wasn't a disaster. So we really started to think there's more mileage in this. And it had always been reckoned that direct drilling in Scotland possibly wasn't going to be easy, if indeed possible, because it's wetter up here, it's colder, it's this, it's that, it's the other. But this merited more investigation, that's for sure. So eventually, it took us till 2016 to actually commit to buying a drill. We didn't actually get rid of our plough and power harrow at the time. We kept it just in case. And we did keep ploughing some fields, and we took the direct drill route as an opportunistic part of the system, and we'd do it when we could until we could teach ourselves how to do it sensibly. And you could argue that's a luxury, but I think it's paying off now. And eventually the aim was to move as far over to direct drilling as possibly could. So if the next slide, please, Christian. So the challenges that we found, and I found along the way with this, first one, you're moving out your comfort zone. We know how to plough a field. We know when you take a cultivator in it, you're going to get a seed bed, and you know when you put the drill through, the field's going to go green by and large. You know about your herbicide choices. We've learnt this through our lives, and there was nothing new to experience, as it were. So it was quite straightforward. So moving out of the comfort zone, and then very quickly, you need to develop skin like a rhino, you realise, because peers will criticise and judge because your fields just don't look the same, and they don't. You know, they look horrendous compared to what we're used to until about May, and then all of a sudden this green crop appears above the stubble, and you think, oh, there's a crop there after all. But you've had all winter of all the jokes and the so on and so forth. But it's not just the neighbours, it's your team. If you're a one-man band, you can make the decision, off you go. But if you've got a team working with you to get the job done, you've got to convince them, and that's a bit harder to do, in my experience. And it's very tricky to take them with you. At the start, we couldn't really show them. There wasn't a lot around in terms of success. You know, if we go down this route of direct drilling, this is what the crops are going to look like, and this is what, you know, we're going to do better out of it. It was very much you're going to have to trust me on this one, guys, and we'll get there. And that's sort of the route we had to take, always with the fallback that we had the other system in the background. But as time went on, we realized that the other system had to disappear. Researching, asking people for help. Where did you find help? You know, a few years ago, it was much harder to find. People weren't so vocal on the internet and social media and things like that. So it was harder to find like-minded individuals or people that had the knowledge. Whereas I think now social media has a huge role to play in where you can learn to try things, share ideas, and just gain a bit of confidence in making any changes that you see fit within your farming business. And it's not necessarily just about machinery. So that's moved on a huge amount now, and I'm quite glad. Then next slide, please, Christian. So we've been muddling away with no-till and a bit of power harrowing and a bit of min-till and all sorts for a few years. And this year, really the start of this year, the penny finally dropped that actually we've got to commit one way or another. Next slide, please. Tough decisions need to be made within many farming businesses, and we're no exception to that. Production costs need to come down. I don't think our soils here are performing to their potential. We do have vegetables in the rotation, and that's not helping the scenario. More intense weather systems need to be coped with. It seems to be either hot and dry or cold and wet. There doesn't seem to be a lot in between, and the rain, when it comes, seems to be so fierce. I mean, I think most of the UK at some point in the last, certainly in August, September, had a 24-hour period where we had 4 inches of rain, 100 millimetres of rain. Now, I can't remember that happening before, and it's really quite scary because you're not going to stop it in a hurry. That amount of water coming down the field is horrendous. And we also have to, we've got an environmental responsibility as an industry to face up to. So, you know, we need to be looking at doing things a bit differently potentially. So we decided as a business that we must make no-till work as a default rather than the opportunistic choice, which is, as I said before, is what we've been doing. So we're now going all out to try and actually no-till will drive our rotation. It will help sort the question about, do we grow roots and veg? Do we continue with that? Do they really make as much money as we think? By the time you've sorted out all the problems that can come from some of these crops, a very big check can be whittled down to not a very big net profit at the end of the day, and you've still done a lot of damage to the soil. So we've got that one. We're blessed with soils that can grow these crops, but is it the right thing to do in the long term? We haven't quite finished that question yet, so we'll see. And finally, do cultivations really improve yield? It was interesting listening to Doug's comment earlier about his compost heap, and he direct drilled it in good conditions, and it was worked out fine. And I indeed see there's been some comments on the chat about somebody's commented saying that they had the choice one year and they cultivated a bit and they didn't cultivate a bit, and the bit that wasn't cultivated yielded the most. So are cultivations for vanity or are they for profit? I'll leave it there. That's been my journey.
Very good, David. Yeah, very, very good. Farming's easy, making profits are hard, but
yeah.
I think we definitely all get there. That sounds fantastic. Okay, so we'll move on to the next poll to get us there. So we're just going to drop Doug in this with a bit of a spring crop question as well. So what percentage of spring cropping would see the biggest reduction in fixed costs? So 25% of your total farm spring crop, 50%, 75%, or 100%. So to lower your costs the most, and Harry and I have been doing a bit of work on this and looking at rotations and whatnot as well. So what percentage of spring crop do you see the biggest reduction in fixed costs? So again, you'll see the tags that Christian's playing about with there. You need to click the polls tab, and then you need to click the windows away from there, and that should let you click on a number there, and it should go black as we see. While we're on it, just waiting for it to close there. If you have got basis and Rosso, just pop them in the questions tab, which you should see. So just type your name and your postcode and your basis and Rosso points. Again, nobody else will see that. That's just on a private chat there. So the answer to that is okay. So very interesting. So 50% of spring cropping, people are thinking we see the biggest reduction in fixed costs. Leading on to a very interesting point there, Doug, for you to carry on. Take us through a little bit of Durie.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I think it all depends. That last question, that poll question, all depends on if you've got clay soils or not. If you're coming into March and April and your soils are as rock solid, I think your fixed costs might be quite considerable. But I'm Doug Christie. I farm just outside Leven in Fife, not very far away from David at Balbirnie. I'm on boys' land and farm roughly 1,500 acres, of which 900 acres are arable crops. The rest of the farm is inorganic and mostly livestock based. So I still have a plow, but a 5-furrow reversible slatted moldboard plow that I use for maybe 30 acres a year, which is reducing to nothing next year. So if anyone's in the market for a good Cumberland plow, then please let me know. And I'll take bids in the next question that Chris is going to put up later on. Can I have the first slide, please, Chris? Not Chris.
Christian, yep.
Christian, sorry, yep. I started, I haven't used a plow on 2/3 of the farm for roughly 20 years now. To begin with, I did a very shallow cultivation, a scratch, and you definitely wouldn't want to sniff it because it had a fairly noxious smell, especially if I didn't drill. If I drilled after it rained, after cultivating, which was not a good idea. I learned the hard way of how to do minimum cultivations, and it wasn't the answer to begin with. But anyway, hindsight's great. This now, for the last probably nearly 10 years now, I've drilled direct drills on all the farm, on all the 2/3 of that of the arable acreage. Well, 100% of the arable acreage. And I bought 11 years ago. I bought a John Dale drill with C-torque points, and it's still going. I've adapted it a bit in the last year, and I put Metcalf points in and taken the front coulters off, and it does the job. It's not the record-breaking yields, but it gives flexibility. I weigh up risk, and the older I get, the less risk I want to take. If I'm drilling wheat, I put undressed seed in, sow it. Quite often I'm not able to roll it and see what comes, and I haven't spent much money if I've got to re-drill it in the spring. And spending only 4.5 litres a hectare of diesel, it's not a big issue. But the important thing is getting across the ground quickly, and I think width is better than I think if you can pull a 6-meter drill with 140, 150 horsepower tractor, or next slide, please, Christian, or a 15-meter drill with 230 horsepower. This is somebody I know down in the Cotswolds, and I think he's got pretty steep ground in places. But if you can do that, buy a drill and a tractor for a combined cost of just over £100,000, you're onto a winner. If you break down for a day, what's the problem? Timeliness is so important, and if you're a millimeter out of seed depth, or 5 millimeters, or a couple of millimeters out of seed depth at sowing, that is not an issue if you get it in good conditions. If you're trying to mush it in at the end of October, you're fighting against the elements and the slugs all the time. Also, one thing I did learn, if anyone does contemplate going into the direct drilling situation, it might be a good idea leveling your fields out. That's one advantage I learned of taking a Horsch cultivator across the fields, shallow cultivator across the fields for the first 8 years of doing it. It leveled the fields out, because if you go direct drilling in 5 years down the line, you notice you can't travel across the field quicker than you travel up and down the field. You'll be kicking yourself for not leveling the fields off before you started the journey, because in most situations you regret, it'll be very disappointing having to go and take a cultivator in at depth 5 or 10 years down the line, because your soils will have improved so much. Can I have the next slide, please, Christian? Rollers, I think they're probably fairly underused on most farms. They are, in effect, a cultivating tool as well. They kill slugs, they kill leather jackets if you've got a fluffy seed beds. This is me using them in June, trying out, that's forage, winter sown forage rye, and I think there's vetch and a few other things in there. And this was me trying to desiccate this rye crop. I think it was a bit late because I had quite a few volunteers, but it was just at the milky ripe stage, or so I thought. And the idea of this would be the plant would be pumping carbon into the plants, pump carbon into the soil up to the flowering stage. After that, carbon doesn't go into the soil. So I was wanting to plant a cover crop in after that, a summer cover crop after that. So I rolled it one way and then went across the way to see if I could get some of the stems mashed up a bit to stop them growing again. But I think there were a few too many volunteers in there. And also, if you are doing a stale seed bed, there's a lot of fancy machinery out there that will chit seed, but what's wrong with the set of rollers that most people have got to be able to chit the seed? And a lot of my knowledge has been, I've got to give a lot of credit to Steve Townsend. 99% of the time, he's been pretty right over the last 20 years. And it's probably the first time I've said this, but I've learned a lot from him, the man from Del Monte, or Monsanto. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, I trialed a stripper head this year, and because I've got livestock in the farm, I thought, wow, what an opportunity to integrate livestock back into my conventional arable situation. Now, if I can get a cover crop broadcasted into there, maybe July or August, then that is a ready-made ration for a cattle over the winter, mob grazing that field. It's really a no-brainer. You don't have to bale the straw, you don't have to take it into the sheds, you don't have to put it out with a straw bedder, you don't have to take the muck out, you don't have to take the silage to the sheds. Certainly for cows, I want to simplify things at the end of the day, and I'm intrinsically a pretty lazy person. So it's the more I try new things, I think change becomes addictive when you get into this system, and you're always looking for the next. You're always looking to change the next thing. So it's forever evolving the farm. There are a huge amount of mistakes and problems that I've had come across in the past, but as long as you're not spending a lot of money on it, like fancy seed dressings or slug pellets, or sometimes you've got to put slug pellets on, but used very little. I've cut insecticides out completely, and I'm a low-cost farmer. Maybe I'm not getting yen yields, but I'm very comfortable at the end of the day with the performance of the farm, and it's kept my interest in farming up there. This change has kept my interest there the whole time. Maybe I'm probably getting a bit boring about it, but thank you very much. I think that's it.
Certainly very thought-provoking there, Doug, and yeah, plenty of questions piling in for us. So we'll just bring everyone back in on that. One of the ones, I'm just flicking through a few of them here, so excuse me when my eyes do go down. So again, taking the basis of this, the actual figures might not be 100% accurate, and I know, obviously you've saved more than that. So you've saved £10 an acre on cultivations, yet that's only worth 70 kilos an acre of extra yield. More cultivation, more yield. Where would you have to be in saving money to outweigh the extra yield in that? And then obviously it is a journey, the bigger picture, we get that. Alongside that, you're going to reduce pesticides, molluscicides, and we were on it last week, weren't we? Reducing inputs goes with this system. We fully get it, but it's a fair comment that £10 an acre is worth 70 kilos an acre of yield.
Who's that been pointed to?
I put it out to the panel. Fastest finger first.
Go on, David.
I would say on our experience here, and indeed mine elsewhere, that you we're not seeing that big. We've run the two systems together. We've run ploughing and power harrowing and min-till and direct drilling, and we've looked at all the numbers across the whole farm, and we can have good crops ploughed, good crops min-till, good crops no-till, and we can have the opposite as well. There's been nothing that's suggested. There's always another element that's dictated whether the crop was good, bad, or indifferent. It's very seldom. The point I'm getting to is that the direct drilling, we didn't see a benefit. The cultivation is not making the difference, as it were. So I don't see the £70 for £10, as it were. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So cultivation's not making the difference, in your opinion.
We had fields put into oats last year, and I let my guard down on a day. There was the guys we'd hired in a low disturbance subsoiler, and we're going to do that end rig with the subsoiler because that'll open the soil up and the crop will grow fine and it'll be great. And we sowed the oats. It was very, very late when we did sow the oats, and then we had the awful winter, and half the field rotted out. But there was just as much rotting on the bit that had been subsoiled as the bit that hadn't been subsoiled. So the subsoiling didn't make any difference whatsoever. All it did was burn fuel and cost money. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it comes back to cost of production, doesn't it? That's the key phrase in all of this, is we have to know our cost of production, and that's the bit we're trying to lower, is our cost of production to maximise the margins. Harry, would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's all about cost control, but it's sometimes you just have to take a step back and evolve the system. And some guys will work well with the plough and power harrow combination, and some guys will work with no-till. It's what you're comfortable with doing and what you're comfortable with managing, really. If you talk to no-till farms in the US, they enjoy becoming a farmer again when they get off the hamster wheel of inputs, where they're not just facilitating inputs. So yeah, it frees up your thinking, really.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the interesting bits, and Bill and I were having a chat earlier about it, on the good old days, and that was about the straw scenario. So, Bill, Doug, you've gone to the ultimate there with the stripper header to leave the straw in place, which I'm still trying to figure out in my head. When you do stripper header, where's the carbon to nitrogen ratio going with that? If you chop the straw, it's 80-1, it's far too much, it should be 7-1. And then I was discussing with Bill earlier that historically we used to burn the crops before the burning ban came in, so that would have alleviated the carbon to nitrogen ratio. Plus, it would have sorted out quite a bit of the weed bank as well. But this is one of these things that a few people are asking about is straw management. One, it has a value. You know, it's great for the gross margin in there. Two, it's actually not helping the crop you're trying to establish in a direct drill or no-till scenario because the carbon to nitrogen is wrong. And we have been there with AHDAS quantifying it. You need to grow organic manure, not apply it. So we'll take that one out there, and we'll get a lot of questions. But where are you guys in that? Are you seeing? I know, David, Doug, you've tried the stripper header. Do you see that now? Is the establishment better, or where are we?
I haven't sown any of the crops into it afterwards. I've done a very small bit, but I got a demo of it right at the end when I was doing the linseed. But the wheat after the linseed is no problem at all. Linseed straw has got it's fairly low carbon. But one interesting thing is in the States, a lot of the people who've been in no-till the longest were using cover crops of legumes and to begin with, but they were finding that that straw for the legumes and the linseed, for example, was breaking it down too quickly. They didn't have cover over the winter to protect the soil from the elements. So they've gone now for a lot more high carbon crops to be able to keep the residue, like the rye takes a long time to break down. I knew that. I found out that to my anyway, but and also wheat straw and oat straw doesn't take long to break down. Barley straw takes a while time to break down, but until you get that that microbial biomass and the soil working for you, if you've been direct drilling at all for a while, then that straw does not take long to break down at all. And we're very lucky in this country. We've got ambient temperatures over nearly all the year over 5 degrees centigrade, which means that the biology is still working in the soil. Why not have a crop growing in there, even though you've got a lot of straw on the surface? But I think a very heavy chopped straw crop on the surface possibly can do more harm than good, and that's probably why I'm looking at the stripper header more, because you get a lot more slug build up underneath there, and it takes longer to dry out in the spring, and you can smear a lot easier, especially smear the soil with cultivation a lot more in the spring or even in the winter if you're going in and it's a bit wetter.
I would agree there. I mean, I think the other thing is that you know, if you're using a stripper header, you're keeping that carbon out of the soil to a degree, and it's the incorporation. Certainly, from my experience, it's the incorporation of large volumes of straw into that layer that you want to keep aerobic and keep working that causes that imbalance. We do both. We incorporate straw and we sell straw. We're fortunate we have a market locally. I noticed a question coming from one of my border colleagues who said, you know, is the cost of is it worth selling straw given the damage that can be done taking it off? That depends on your soil health, it depends on your establishment technique, and it depends on the ability for that soil to break that straw down if you're incorporating large quantities of it. I'm intrigued about the stripper header, Douglas. I'm just wondering, have you bought one yet?
I'm usually quite tight. It was a no-brainer. I'm sorry. It opens up. It can't grow. You can't use it on all crops. Oilseed rape's tricky.
No.
But most other crops, because I bought it, I'm going to have to change my whole system. And but I can see way through it. And if I can bring cattle onto the equation, why do I need to bale that straw and take it out and stack it and load it onto lorries and things like that when I can have it in the field for the livestock to eat? And maybe it gives an opportunity to increase my livestock numbers and have a ready-made ration in the field there. And rather than building concrete buildings and going down what Joel Salatin said from Virginia, what are all these buildings doing? This concrete being put up in infrastructure. But I'm maybe being slightly controversial here, but I think you've got to open your mind a bit. I think I've certainly opened my mind that I've been seeing in other ways of doing things, and it's becoming a lot more clearer the way I want to go in the future, and it doesn't suit everyone. I'm not saying that. I think at the end of the day, on the economic side, you'll possibly do so many different things and end up with the same result at the end of the day financially, but I'm wanting to improve my soils, and I don't want to see them going down the rivers, and I don't want to see them going being blown away. And we're lucky we've still got our soils in this country. When you see Midwest in the States has lost half its topsoil. Okay, it's quite deep to begin with, but they've lost half their topsoil on sloping land.
Now,
I would agree. Sorry. I was just going to agree, just come back on that one. I would agree absolutely entirely. And just to throw in one other piece of sort of aspect, if you like, with technology increasing as it has done over the years, the one thing I've always sort of advocated is, people saying it's fantastic, you can use satellite imagery to look at crops and you can do this, that, and the other. But ultimately, if you forget that what we farm is beneath our feet, then you've lost the game right from the start, and it's sometimes a bit of a distraction, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill, absolutely. Now, one of the questions, just flicking through some of them here, is about bringing new blood into the industry. And obviously, we're all young once. You all get the buzz of a new tractor or a new drill or the the new way of doing, if you like. How are we actually going to keep people involved in the industry? Is there any mechanism you can see to making that work? Put that out for discussion to you guys. David?
I think it's an interesting question, actually, that, and something we've talked about here a bit. The young guys coming into farming traditionally, like certainly my generation, like driving tractors, it's great fun, listen to the radio and it's grand. And more and more farmers are trying to move away from that and do less of that work if we can. And I think not to try and stray too far off topic, we need to create an industry that's attractive for people to come into. And by being spending less time sitting doing tractor work and having more time effectively to do other things like have spare time and enjoy yourselves and do what a lot of our friends do outside of this industry. If we can aim to create an industry like that, then potentially we can attract more people in, because essentially that's what we're competing against. So we need to make it appealing. It's not about long hours. We've got to be smarter with what we do so that we can basically do the same job in a slicker amount of time. And it could be direct drilling, it could be old wide kit, it could be all sorts of things. But yeah, we've got to think like the young, and what do they want? They want free time. They want time with their families. We've got to create that somehow.
Yep, absolutely agree, David. Good. Okay. Well, I realise it's getting close to I'm a celebrity, get me out of here time, so we'll better progress through the slides, Christian, and plug what's going on in the upcoming series. Publications and tools. There we are. So again, the good old drainage guide when things are too wet for all the heavy land guys. It's one of the things that goes with it: the karst clay, the hand slip clay, any of that sort of stuff. You've got to look after the drains. We've got Harry's machinery calculator up there as well. Very interesting, available for download. Keep an eye on these links. Some things are a bit easier than others to find on the website. And on the next slide, I think we've got, here we are, the Monitor Farm Mondays. So we've done our one. The next one up is benchmarking the bacon, which I think is Philip, isn't it? So there's a program coming up to you guys. So, hopefully we've tried to make it as interesting as possible looking forward. So again, the Monday evenings will be the time for it. So each of the Knowledge Exchange team will be taking an issue forward and taking it through the webinar. Okay, I think we do have one of the team, Christian. Oh, Agronomy Week coming up as well, Monday the 30th of November. So that's Emily Pope has been putting that together. Again, all these things are very difficult with the current situation, all web-based, so our entire team will be involved with that alongside the potato team, so cereals and potatoes together on this one. Usually a lot comes out of that with all the experts involved. Again, daily webinars, keep looking up that one for it. So Agronomy Week 2020 is the bit at the end there. Okay, and next slide, Christian. And there we are, the global team or the nationwide team. Sorry, Harry, I don't actually think you're on this one. No, you've been the knowledge transfer.
I just cover the whole country. Don't worry about it.
You're the whole country.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the feeling when you see the border there north, and there's a fair range of soil types in it. So, yeah, Luke, thanks very much for your time this evening. Thanks to our panel, and thanks to everyone for logging in. Again, the question tab is there. Put your in-rows and basis points in if you want them. If not, feel free to email them to myself or to Christian. Thanks very much, everybody.